there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to paint a lilac-breasted roller, which is a bird from Africa. I thought the colors were so gorgeous, and I thought it'd be beautiful in watercolor. You could paint it in whatever medium you prefer, though, and I will link to the reference photo in the video description. I'm starting off by spraying my watercolor palette with some water so the paints can activate while I do my drawing. I'm using Hahnemühle Cezanne watercolor paper, cold press for this, and I'm sketching right on my watercolor paper. You can always sketch in a sketchbook and then transfer it or on some copy paper if you're worried about messing up your paper. And let me tell you, this drawing took a few turns for the worse at times, and I probably should have done that, but luckily this paper was really robust, and it took my erasing and didn't leave any smudges or anything like that. So I was really fortunate there. Most of your good 100% cotton watercolor papers will be quite robust and resilient. So I'm basically just sketching in my basic shapes. I like to sketch the bird first and then do the branch, because sometimes if you do your branch first, it can be tough to make the bird line up exactly where you want it. So I try to get my focal image done first, and then I put the branch in. I was pretty happy with the drawing, and I think the drawing could have been fine at this point if I wanted to just go with it, but I loved the curious look that the bird had on his face with having his beak tipped up a little bit, so I decided that I'm going to be tweaking this a little bit. Getting as much information in on your sketch, getting your sketch as accurate as you can from the get-go is going to save you a lot of time and frustration when you do your painting, so that would be my suggestion. Oh, and I wanted to let you know, today is the last day of the promotion I have going on in my shop for St. Patrick's Day. So if you've been looking to take one of my classes, you can save 40% with the coupon code LUCKY, and I will repeat that in the video description so you can copy it and paste it and grab a class if you want to today. I'll also have the full-time version of this tutorial in Critique Club. If you're a member there, you can check it out. It'll be March bonus lesson number 2. This drawing for this took me about 16 minutes, which is probably more than I usually spend on a sketch if I'm doing right on my watercolor paper. I usually keep my lines a little bit lighter and looser, but that face was just really bugging me. I wanted to get that gesture in the beak and the eye right. So you can see that I kind of adjusted my sketch pad a little bit here and there, my paper block, so that I could see it at an angle. I do find that often, because when I'm recording, I have my camera over my table. When I'm recording and I'm working flat like that, I can get a skewed perspective, so it helps to tip it up like this. So if you work at a table, generally we do if we're doing watercolor, we work flat. It doesn't hurt to lift it up or put some books down or something to prop it up while you're drawing, so you don't have it too skewed. And I flip stuff over upside down, especially if I'm doing something that's like a vase that's symmetrical, just because, you know, you skew your work. I'm actually working on a drafting table, but I never tip it because I always have my jars of water and stuff on my table for rinsing brushes and stuff. So that's just one of the things you want to keep in mind when you're working flat, so you don't end up with a wonky drawing that you don't realize until after it's painted and you take a break and then you look at it again and you're like, oh, that's totally off. So there's another little tip for you there. So I got the beak tipped up a little bit better now. I am lightening up a few of my lines and just brushing off the crumbs. And now I'm going to go ahead and do my my first wash. And I'm just wetting the paper all over. And I'm starting off with some ultramarine blue at the top of the sky. I want to have kind of a blurred background here, but I also want to introduce most of the colors that I'll be working with. I want to have some texture, so I'm flicking on some color. I'm adding some mauve, also some phthalo blue. I'm going to do some Aureolin too, because I had some Aureolin left on my palette from I was using colors that I don't typically use, so I thought I had that on my palette from that, so I figured I'm going to use that up because I just had a little dab of it and I didn't have a well for it to go in. Too much information, huh? Anyway, I used Aureolin for my yellow, to make a long story short. And yellow ochre and burnt sienna, and I'm just basically basing in the ground and sky. So this bird is native to Africa. It tends to like to perch in dead trees because it can survey the landscape a little bit better. I think it eats bugs and small lizards mainly, so it's got to be able to kind of see see what's out there. I'm blotting out any area that I think might bother me when I am going on to my next layer. So the branch is one of the lightest objects there, so I want to get that blotted out. And if I had any brush marks that I didn't like, I'm just going in with a dry, big round brush like a mop and softening those out. So you can do that when everything's wet. The great thing about cotton paper, and it doesn't matter what brand, if it's 100% cotton, is that because it's a little more absorbent, it also holds the water at a more even tension, so you don't have stuff drying unevenly as much as you would with a cellulose paper. Now, if you can look up in the top right hand corner of my picture, you can start to see a bloom forming. So I grabbed my spray bottle and actually spritzed the whole thing, because my paper at this point was starting to dry, and then I just tipped it around and let it flow. If you want to soften an edge, lift out very gently, you can use your brush for that. Just dry it off and go in and brush over, drink up that pigment and excess water. If you need to lift more aggressively, just use a tissue or paper towel or absorbent rag to press onto your paper and lift up. Now that this layer is dry, we're going to go in with the first layer on our bird, and I am going to wet the entire bird first. Now with watercolor, your paint's only going to go where the paper's wet. So I am just using this round brush to wet the areas where I want my paint to travel. I don't want to have any harsh lines on, like, within the watercolor's body, but I do want a fairly crisp I want a crisp line. I want the bird in focus, so he's crisp against the blurry background. Hope that makes sense. Now, when I do get to the edges of the bird, I can flick out little feathers, and I'm doing that there, like under the chin. And I'm just keeping in mind that with watercolor, especially when you're working on a really wet surface, like the area I had wet here on the bird, that it's going to shift lighter. So I'm going in a little bit bolder with my color than I want it to end up for this first layer, just because I know it's going to lighten as it dries. I'm using a variety of different paints in this palette. I've had this palette for over 20 years, and it was secondhand to me, and it had some paint in it when I got it. So I don't even know what some of the colors are. I know that mauve is Cotman though. I know a lot of people kind of rag on Cotman paints, but you know, they're easy to find. You can get them all over the world, and they're reliable. I don't think there's anything wrong with using Cotman paints by Winsor & Newton. And then if you love a color, you can always step up to the artist grade. So, you know, if you're happy with the paint you're using, go for it. If you're not happy with the paint you're using and it's, you know, junky paint, then upgrade. But don't blame paint, or don't be snobby against paint just because, you know, you hear other people being snobby about it. I mean, it's so much more about your skill than it is about your materials. Granted, you do need a decent quality material, but you don't need to pay $20 a tube to paint a decent painting, you know? I mean, I just want to say that because I know a lot of people rag on Cotman, and I know there's at least a few Cotman colors in that palette because I just know there are. Because there's some colors I don't think I've ever bought in artist quality. I don't think I've ever bought an artist quality mauve. The Cotman is just so vibrant and so lovely. And as the paint starts to dry, as my bird starts to dry, I can use the paint a little drier, and I can go in and put a little bit of shading and texture and get slightly fuzzed, slightly soft focus lines. And that's what I wanted on the bird because feathers are fluffy and soft, and I want to have that appearance, especially in the chest where the feathers would be nice and fluffy and blended. Now I'm putting a wash on the branch. I'm using yellow ochre. I'm also putting it on the feet as well. And then I'm adding some of the mixed gray that I made with burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. That will give me kind of like a cooler color, and I'm keeping it fairly light because I know I want the branches light. This part that's sticking up is actually being shadowed by the bird, so that's going to be a little bit darker. And it also would be a little bit darker in any cracks and crevices on the branch, like where the dead wood is splitting, and also right next to the toes because the toes are casting a little bit of a shadow. So I try to get as much as I can in on that first wash because it just leaves it with a much fresher look. But if you are concerned about things blurring more than you want it to, you can always just do a really light wash and then go in with the darks later. And I like to get a variety of color here, so I'm kind of varying what I'm dipping into on my palette so I can get a nice natural earthy look that's got a little bit of, you know, highlight and shadowing already done. For the beak, I'm adding my darkest area, which is the gray that I mixed with ultramarine blue and burnt sienna again. And I'm also going to base coat the eye in while I'm at it, being careful to avoid painting in the sparkle. And then I'm just kind of blending some of the gray mix out from the darkest lines because you will have a little bit of a a blur there. Sorry, that went off camera. I didn't realize that when I moved it. And now I'm putting in some shadows on the toes. And I also want to get to the kind of underbelly area that I hadn't painted yet. That's a little bit darker, so I'm going in with phthalo blue and a little bit of that mixed gray in there. And I'm using the phthalo blue to paint the underside of the tail feathers, which you can kind of see underneath the wing, and you can kind of see sticking out from the back of the body as well. I took some phthalo blue and added some burnt sienna to it, and that made me a really, really dark greenish blue, and that was a really nice shadow color as well. I'm also bringing some of that dark color up into the eye area where it is the darkest. The phthalo blue is a little more transparent, so even though it's got that greeny blue cast to it, because it's so dark, it helps me get those crisper, darker colors that I want there, and I can pull out teeny tiny little details. I've switched to a number 2 round here just so I can get those little wisps, those really, really small feathers, so that I'll have a little bit more detail around the face. I like to detail most around the eyes and beak of a bird just because it starts to bring the character into focus, and that's kind of like the most important part. That's the personality of the bird, and I like to spend a little more time with a smaller brush in those areas. And I'm also just paying attention to undertones that I see in the painting and adding those where I see them, like little bits of brown and ochre on the toes and beak and stuff like that. I wanted to have a light phthalo blue wash on the tops of the tail feathers because it reflects the light and it has a more iridescent quality. And now I'm going in with some tealy color over the golden wing here. I'm using the phthalo blue and a little bit of the Aureolin for that. And now I'm kind of painting around the chest fluff with the phthalo blue and getting those feathers in there that are a little more blue, and just kind of puttering around with some grays for shadow and starting to carve out the form of the bird. So this can take a little bit of time, but that's all right because, you know, art is here to enjoy. Now I'm looking at the branch and looking for the darker shadows and adding those in, and those tend to be on the underside. I'm dry brushing a bit. This is a Mimic Kolinsky brush, so it's one of the Creative Mark Faux Kolinskys, and I am just dragging it across. So I can actually have that brush fairly loaded, and because it's not a pointed round, it's more of a blunt round, I can drag and get some texture, and I thought that's really effective on this branch. If I load it up even more, I can get a little bit more of a crisp line, but it's not a pointed round. It could be that I've just worn it down because I've had those for quite a while. But it doesn't come to a point like the Mimic squirrels do. So just to kind of give you a little bit of a background there. And so it help you choose what brushes you might want to invest in if you are looking to get some brushes. I'm adding little touches of burnt sienna to the back of the wing there because I can see it in the reference photo, and I find that putting some earth tones in can really make the more vibrant colors, the more jewel tones really sing because you have that contrast of earthy next to vibrant. It gives it a little bit more nuance and makes it feel a little more realistic than just having crazy bright colors. So think about that. Anytime you're painting something and it just feels garish, maybe you're missing out on some neutral undertones and you just need to add something like that in there. As you're applying your paint, make sure that your stroke work is going in the direction that the feathers would be going in so that it feels natural and it is harmonious. Now I'm working on some spattering in the background. Of course, if you don't like this, you don't have to do it. I like to spatter down water first, and then I like to spatter on paint. Then I like to add paint to the puddles that I have. I think it just gives it a really, a really fresh look, and I feel like it's a nice contrast from all the kind of tight painting that we're doing on the bird. It gives us a nice loose contrast. I also like to see my colors mix and mingle. I like to see what different pigments do next to each other in those puddles. So, you know, skip it if you don't like it, or put some detailed flowers in if you prefer. But this is what I thought would just accent this bird really well. Now, of course, this bird would be in the desert, not really have lots of foliage around him, but I like this. So, you know, it's my painting. I'm going to do what I like. And you can do that as well. Now I did another layer of the spats and let it dry, and then I'm going in and spattering on some watered down white gouache. Now make sure that you have no clumps of the gouache in your brush while you're doing this. I noticed after it was dry that I did have some kind of patchy areas that could have been avoided if I mixed it out better with water and then cleaned my brush before adding pigments. But now I'm just adding the same colors into the splashy white blobs, the splashy white kind of milky puddles, because then that's going to give me another layer of dots, which for me look like resemble leaves and flowers and foliage and things like that. So I just basically wanted to build up that pattern of the polka dot spots and the texture that could be leaves, leave it up to the viewer's imagination, and I kind of go from there. I just really like the look of it, and I feel like it brings a lot of interest. Now I'm back to my number 2 round, and I figured while I had that gouache out, I'm going to go ahead and put some really light fluffy feathers. Now the gouache is watered down, so it's not going to be completely opaque. It's going to be almost like a Chinese white, and I'm just going in and adding little wisps. These wisps are not going to show up bright white when they dry. They're going to be very pale, but they are going to give me that fluffy feeling that I'm after. Of course, if you don't want to use white, that's totally fine. You don't have to. I used to be somebody who never ever used white, never ever mixed anything with their watercolors, but I realized life is too short, and I'm gonna paint however I feel that painting is going to be best best served. So I will use gouache from time to time, and colored pencils and ink and things like that. You don't have to. Your painting is your painting. You can do whatever you want, but I decided that I do like to mix in other media. Now I've taken some more of that kind of dark mix. It's phthalo blue and burnt sienna this time, so it's a little bit cooler undertoned, and I am putting in the shadows. You can see kind of a split or like an indent in the center of the breast, so I wanted to have that in there to give a little bit of form and volume to the feathers and to the bird. And I'm just kind of refining and looking around for my reference photo and deciding what I need to add. The reference photo is from Unsplash, and I will have it linked down below if I don't forget. If I forget, just remind me, and I'll make sure to pop it in there. I don't know why I always forget that. And I'm just basically doing the same techniques, just layering those strokes until I get the fluffiness that I am after. I decided to add some highlights onto the feet with a white gouache, and at this point I wasn't sure if I was going to add any colored pencil to the picture. I was really happy with the way it was coming out with the white. So I'm just at this point doing as many details as I think I might want with the gouache. I'm putting highlights on the little talons because you can really see them in the photo. I don't want to get too detailed here. This isn't the focus of the picture, but I just want to have enough detail there so that it enhances and there's no confusion about what's going on there. So I'm going to let this dry and then come back and decide what I want to add to it. Even though I was pretty pleased with how the painting looked already, I decided that some colored pencil would really help it out a little bit, especially some mineral orange for the iris, because I felt like it was just kind of a black hole in the eye, and then I added some of that in the feathers. I also added some golden yellow and added that to the red feathers, reddish brown feathers, and in the toes and beak. I'm using a little bit of pumpkin orange here and there, and I've got some cool gray 90% that I'm adding into my black areas. I'm not going to use black, but I will use some indigo to darken the colors because it's such a dark transparent color, but it's not going to be like a black hole. I'm also using really light pressure because I don't want to change the sheen of my paper. Sometimes when you go over with a colored pencil, if you burnish, you flatten out the tooth of the watercolor paper and also give it a shiny spot, and I don't want that to happen. I'm going in with some turquoises and teals and just kind of pumping up the color on the head and the chest, and that beautiful seafoam green is so pretty in those fluffy areas. I also think that golden yellow creamy color looks really nice when you add that within the teals and the browns. There's some chartreuse there to pop up the colors a little bit, and a little bit of brown. I really like that dark brown and sepia color in the wood. It can also really give you some nice texture if you use it in the wood, but I don't want to do too much because I don't want to draw attention away from the face of the bird. And that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this speed paint, and if you want the real-time version of this, you can find it in Critique Club. I'll have a link to that in the video description. Don't forget, if you want to take one of my classes, use the coupon code LUCKY for 40% off through tonight at midnight. Thanks for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.